Hello, and
Hello.
welcome to this episode of Rule of Carnage. This is a video sequence of or podcast listening do's, upon which myself, Glenn Ford, a games designer and developer, and my good chum Mike Hutchinson, also games designer and developer,
Hello.
talk about designing better miniatures games, or at least we try to. We have a good go at it.
We do, and we design better miniature games when we both don't have colds and snotty noses. But you'll have to bear with us as we
Yeah,
sump through the sump
there is the reality of winter afoot. So
and
uh,
having kids.
yes. I was thinking a little recently about well
That was one of my favourite sentences yet, actually.
I was thinking a little recently.
I was yeah, I was yeah. No, I don't know. I don't know how to punctuate it.
Okay, I mean I wouldn't dare go in there with punctuation. You'll lose a leg.
Keep your commas away.
I
What
was
were you
thinking,
thinking about recently?
I was thinking about the process I went through back when I was designing was what was Pitch and Yaw at the time
Oh yeah.
and is now Boards and Black Flags. And the lesson I think I learned from it and applied to Puke Apocalypse,
Hmm.
um, which is about stopping sort of default behaviors in players. So Boards and Black Flags, Pitch and Yaw, is a pirate-based skirmish game where the deck is shifting backwards and forth, so people fall back and forth if they've been knocked over. Now,
The inspiration of which, if I remember correctly, was we looked at a couple of pirate games and you went, why is there no pirate game that actually has pirate ship mechanics in it? I'm going to fix that immediately.
yeah, there was a bit of that. There was a lot of watching Black Sails, the
Oh, yeah.
show, and just things in which onboard combat is incredibly chaotic and whatnot. Um, and basically, I wrote a version of the game, and it had this shifting and pitching and yawing mechanic in it. It had these weather mechanics, etc., etc.
So
And also,
players like miniatures would get thrown around physically and stuff would fall on top of them and injure them. And
etc. Yeah, absolutely. And also because it's a pirate game, everyone had cutlasses and muskets and could
yeah.
shoot each other and shank each other up. And basically, the mechanics were essentially I could trip you over, in which case, when the deck shifted, you go skinning across the deck over the side and get like insta killed.
Mm.
I can run up and shank you with my cutlass and do like a wound. Um, and what I found in playtesting is that nobody ever tripped anybody over. Nobody ever went over the side. Everybody just ran up and shanked each other with their cutlasses because people understand running up and doing a wound to somebody with a pointy bit of metal. And they don't necessarily understand so I've got to take a test in order to trip the person, but they might be able to stand up, and then I've got to hope that the ship is moving in the right direction in order to get them sliding around. And then there's also these crates and it's like, balls to that, I'm just going to run up and shank people. And it was perfectly fine as a pirate game where people ran around and shanked each other, and occasionally crates got involved in the
Right.
action. It was fine. It was fun. It was etc. etc. But fundamentally, I didn't want it to be a game primarily about people running up and stabbing each other and shooting each other. I wanted it to be this game about positioning and like knocking people over and keeping an eye on your surroundings and the ground you're on, and that being more important than maybe the man you're fighting, the sort of, I don't know, the Batman thing where it's like, oh, you must mind your surroundings. That's more important than the sort of guy in front of you.
Mm.
And so I had a few options. One is make stabbing just really suboptimal, just make it a really bad, unfun idea, for people to engage with. And so people stop doing it and then
Mm.
start doing the fun thing and risk somebody just engaging with something really unfun for ages in the game. Um,
Or indeed them saying, well, I want to be doing this thing and the designer has failed to make it fun. So this is a rubbish game.
Absolutely. Option two is make a perfectly acceptable piratey game that has like this environmental thing going on that I wanted to have going on, but really the environmental thing is a whole lot of faffing about,
Mm.
or something that is a bit of a background noise within a perfectly good pirate skirmish game. And I could totally take out the sort of pitching around stuff and still have a perfectly good pirate skirmish game. And so why are we having to stop at the end of every turn and worry about where all the crates are and stuff? Or option three is stop letting people shoot and stab each other and just go, no, apparently your cutlasses,
There's no button for that. There
they're,
isn't a button for it.
they just don't hurt your cutlasses. This is like Pirates of the Caribbean. People don't run up, stab people, and then their guts are everywhere and they bleed out and die. Everybody dies off screen because they've fallen off the edge of the ship, or they've been, it's
Right. It's a PG pirate skirmish game.
yeah, it's a pulp pirate
Yeah.
skirmish game. It's
Yeah.
all of those.
Yeah.
There's far more of a tradition of pirate movies in which there is no blood and no.
Right. Yeah. You finish someone off with a cutting insult, not a blade.
Yes, and the villain always ends up going over the edge of the ship just in case there's going to be a sequel, and people
Right.
always get like knocked off screen by a crate. You don't actually
Yeah.
see.
You just see the crocodile going underwater. You don't actually see the guy getting eaten.
Yeah, absolutely. Fundamentally, something like Black Sails is such a sort of impactful show because it has pirates actually battering each other with cannonballs and bottles and stuff like it probably would have happened. And it's incredibly visceral and horrifying because that's not our vision of like cinema pirates. And so, in many ways, I'm making a game that's closer to my vision anyway. But the point is, I basically took one of the main things that most people will be expecting when approaching a pirate game, which is I'm going to have a pistol and a cutlass and I'm going to have to stab you and shoot you, and just go, no, you just can't. You've got a pistol and a cutlass, but you just can't stab people to death with it. You can't shoot people to death with it. It just doesn't happen. I know, I know, I know. I also don't care.
Yeah. I mean, like the idea that just is sort of forcing itself into the front of my brain is just this like comparison with like the affordances that a particular video game will give you are entirely set in stone, and you can only do the things that the video game provides code to do. And it like this idea of like Jumpman, like the original Super Mario running up the Donkey Kong ladders, like you have to jump over the barrels. That's the only option you're given. You can't blow them up. You can't like report the monkey to the authorities. You can't get a demolition crew to blow the building up. Like none of those things are available to you. There is a button for jumping. You have to jump over the barrels. And so like in many regards, like of course, as the games designer, you are allowed to specify a limited palette of actions in order to interact with this environment. But of course, like we work in a medium that emerged from simulation and the recreation of potentially any number of battlefield scenarios, and thus like this idea of, well, no, let me imagine what's going to happen, and then you as the game designer need to provide me with systems to achieve that. And that's kind of like almost like an unwritten default way round of doing it. But of course, that's nonsense when you look at video game design, and it's nonsense when you look at board game design as well. But like, so I think what you're doing is simply saying, no, there's a palette of verbs that I'm going to provide to you. I'm not going to provide you the stabbing verb. Like that doesn't, you can't stab, jump. You like Mario can't stab Koopas. Like that's not a thing.
Yeah, but it seems so weird to pull out some of these things, and it seems like
No, it feels almost transgressive. It's like, well, I'm a pirate. Of course, I've got a stabbing implement. Like, why am I holding a gun if I can't shoot it? But well, I don't know. It's just you can't get
yeah,
over
it's
it.
like a guy popped up on the Discord recently with a horror game, and it's perfectly solid horror game. It's got some interesting bits to it, but fundamentally, everyone's allowed to have guns, and there are shotguns and rifles and pistols, and the rifle has this mightiest range. And if you build a rifle character, what you can do is just stand there in the corner of the thing going, I am not worried about zombies. This is fine. This is absolutely okay. And it's like, this is a horror game. This is meant to be a horror game. I should never, ever feel comfortable because me and my buddies have all got rifles that have like good, solid rifle range.
Maybe, but like even then, like, you know, something like Left 4 Dead provides a ton of like mechanics where you can say, well, yeah, you've got a rifle, but there's 50 of them and they're all running towards you. Or like if you stand for too long in one place and aim, then the smoker comes and like grabs you and like you're screwed.
No,
So there's
no,
like,
sure. There are ways around these things. But there is the fundamental sort of like we have an idea that guns should have like power hierarchies within a game, and that
yeah,
people who can fire guns should have levels of goodness. So we have this inbuilt idea that there should be a gun that's really good and
mm,
really powerful, and a guy who's really good at firing that gun, because that's just wrong if those things aren't true. And
mm.
so there should be a build I can make where I can just walk in and blow everybody away with my gun. And it's like, no, they shouldn't. Not
No,
necessarily.
yeah, it doesn't serve the narrative, it doesn't serve the fantasy, it doesn't deliver the experience.
Yeah, and I think so often we just default to this sort of there are certain things that should be in, even violent skirmish games, because I'm interested in non-violent skirmish games more and more, I think, because they offer more interesting options. But we default to a sort of if a game has combat in it, there needs to be shooting rules. There need to be some level of shooting rules, even if it's just slings and bows. Things need to be able to get shot in the face at range, and guns should be pretty darn effective, and etc. etc. And it's just like there doesn't need to be anything in your game. This is what it boils down to for me. There is nothing that has to be in your game. There is nothing that is not within your power to say, I
Mm,
don't care, it's gone, it's out. Again, in a different Discord, somebody was popped up talking about a game we worked on, sort of saying, the player comes expecting a certain thing,
mm.
and if the game does not give them that certain thing, that is a badly designed game.
Mm.
And it's like I don't think that's necessarily true, and I don't think that that's true as in the player comes expecting a certain physical mechanical thing, and if I don't get that, the game is bad. I think, but
Right, and there's potentially a problem that we talked about in an earlier video of like how you have sold the game and whether your game delivers on the thing that you kind of sold it in as. But like if I come to a first person shooter game
mm,
expecting survival mechanics and this one doesn't have survival mechanics, is that a badly designed FPS? No, it's just doesn't have survival mechanics in it.
no, absolutely. And if what you've attempted to design is, tabletop war game rifle simulator, then I very much question your design goals. It's like hopefully nobody's going in there going, well, what I was expecting was to be able to fire a rifle, and I cannot fire a rifle, so I don't see anything within this game to be of interest or use to anybody. Thank you very
Right,
much.
right,
You know,
right.
hopefully what you're offering is something a bit more sort of high concept than that to some degree. Not that I'm knocking, tabletop rifle simulator. I kind of want to make tabletop rifle simulator now, but
I mean, I've spent a lot of time with those light gun games where you hunt things.
yeah, there must be some form
But I
of
think there's like even in that silly off comment, like I think like there's a thing about creating a purity of a game experience which says this is the thing that I'm excited about and this is the thing that I'm designing about, and there's lots of opportunities to accidentally dilute the purity of the thing that you're trying to make by adding too many nouns and too many verbs and too many options and too many things that you add because you feel like they ought to be there. And I do this all the time. Like even now I'm adding a campaign system that won't be full enough tested to the game that I'm writing. I'm doing it because people expect it and I kind of want it to be there, but like it's ruining the purity of what I'm providing and delivering. And am I just doing that because, players are going to come to the game expecting there to be a campaign system and therefore it ought to be there? And so it's really, yeah, I really agree with you that it's worth examining whether these things need to be in there.
mm,
And I like the fact that your example is as sort of fundamental and central as like, can I make a close combat attack? Like that feels like in almost every case, the answer would be yes, of course, but it doesn't have to be 100% of cases.
Yeah, and it certainly doesn't have to be a close combat attack that can wound somebody, that can kill somebody. It's totally fine for it to be about repositioning, or in the case of boards and black flags, it's about tripping somebody over because that's what it's about.
Mm,
And again, puke apocalypse, you just can't attack each other like in normal ways. All you can do is blast each other with this acidic vomit and cause each other to swell up and explode. Because I know full well that if there's any other way of like two characters being able to attack each other in the game, that will be the main way that characters will attack each other. And I don't want that to happen. I don't, that's not what the game's about. It's like sometimes, we've talked about like putting getting shooting teams in Gaslands and racing teams in Gaslands to
mm.
sort of live in the same world all the time in all the scenarios, was a sort of a,
Tricky.
a puzzle with too many corners in it, that we sort of generated. And I do wish sometimes there had been a few bits in Gaslands that had said, you're not allowed guns today, maybe just
Mm.
here, just now, maybe you're just not allowed guns, despite the fact that this is a Mad Max world and this is a Death Race 2000, and obviously everybody's got guns coming out of every possible orifice at all times.
Mm.
Right here, right now, maybe just for this 5 minutes, no guns.
Mm.
Um, but the thing is, it takes, I think, a certain amount of like confidence or arrogance or just sheer dumbass stupidity.
To like pull obvious chunks that are expected out of a game and say no, they're not going to be here. Yeah.
Yeah, yeah, to pull something out where everybody's going to come in. I know everybody who plays Borders and Black Flags will go like,
I
I've got
mean,
a
because
cutlass.
imagine the first person that made like an on rails shooter or something and was like, oh, wait, so am I allowed to move around? No, you can't move. You'll just get moved by the game. So what? It doesn't make any sense. Like, what am I doing?
And the thing is, it's so true what you say about the way it works with digital games, where you're constantly playing a digital game and you're running around and you get trained into the fact that you can't pick up or interact with certain objects by the game, because in the first room you try and open all these drawers and it just says that they don't work, and then you stop looking, and then halfway through the game you're meant to open a particular drawer, and it's like, but those aren't what these hands do
Yeah,
apparently.
exactly.
And you've dropped this in on me, and it's like, and so you say those games can totally get away with somebody who can run and jump and shoot and use complex objects, but can't like open a cupboard. And it's like, that's,
Yeah,
yeah.
or you'll encounter plenty of game like Dark Souls doesn't have a jump button. Like
Mm.
you can't jump, you can't go up things. Like you just walk around. Like there's no button for it, and it's like, well, imagine a skirmish game where you weren't allowed to go up or down levels. Everyone would be like, why? Where's the climbing rules? Let's immediately house rule that in. It's like, well, no, this is a decision about what the feel of the game is and what you're allowed to do in it. And
Yeah, I think it's odd that we work in a medium where we often assume certain things are going to be in our games, like there's some sort of little boogeyman who'll come past and go, I'm going to put shooting in your game. I don't care whether you want it or not. That's where it should be. There we go. There's the shooting rules. And then off he wafts to his next appointment. But
well,
yeah,
I think it's interesting as well that, and maybe this is a broader conversation, but like there is clearly there is a not yet complete and maybe endless loop of taking like the core kind of movement, morale, melee, and missile sort of war game and making it better and better and more interesting and more different. But I don't know that there's like a peak that we've yet to reach. Like I think games design will continue to iterate, but there are some games with the 4Ms today that are brilliant and execute those things magnificently. And I suppose in a similar way to you reaching for non-combat games and being like, there's a huge area of undiscovered territory here. I think taking as your premise the idea that you're allowed to limit the number of verbs in a game and then limiting odd verbs is an interesting place to push and say, well, no, this game is this game feels this way because it doesn't have, things that you would expect. It's not part of this. It's like when first person shooters first arrived, and it's like, no, this isn't a continuation of something else. This is a break, and there's something new. And then those things iterated, and some things got introduced and something got limited. And so I don't know. I'm interested by the fact that changing the palette changes the sort of the possibility of the games that you can create, and even limiting things, just starting from that idea of limiting things, can create a fundamentally different game experience, which is new and exciting and interesting to interact with.
Absolutely. I think I had a major realization a couple of weeks ago. I was at a convention, which was more of a sort of historic wargaming convention. And I was there doing A Billion Suns and Gaslands and Hobgoblin. And I was sitting with my Gaslands board, which is 2 foot square, and it's plenty for a convention demo game. And sort of directly opposite me, there was a guy with a 12-foot square table and 2 additional 6 foot by 2 foot tables for all of the paperwork necessary for what was being played upon the 12-foot square.
How do you get to the middle of the 12-foot table?
Enormous difficulty. And then somebody fell through one of the tables at one point during the weekend. And that wasn't like the biggest table. There were tables with like middles where people could crawl under and pop up. There was people playing, 6 foot by 8 foot, and people played a single game that lasted the full weekend and they didn't finish it. And they were happy about that. That was fine with them.
Yeah, of course.
And I'm not.
Yeah, just reaching from a different experience.
Yeah, I'm not knocking any part of it, any part of that. They had a lovely weekend and they have their hobby, and their things. And I was just looking at those games going, it's like, what I am interested in designing is so concerned with things that you guys not just aren't interested in, but have an exactly opposite opinion to.
Right, yeah, they'd be counter to what you'd be looking for. Like, it plays in a small situation. Well, I want an expansive table. It plays really quickly. Well, I don't want it to play quickly. I want to have a luxurious weekends gaming. Like, why would I want it to be over in an hour?
Yeah, exactly. Those guys are like, look, I've got to a certain age where I can have a room with a 6 foot by 8 foot table in it that is permanently set up for my game. And I want to get as many of my miniatures onto that table as are physically possible. And I want that game to take me and my mate the whole weekend, during which we never have to speak to anybody else. So the idea that you're like, oh, this is great, it fits onto a 2 foot square table and you can get through a game in like 45 minutes. It's just like
random groups of children can play it with you.
Yeah. Why would you want to be striving for that? That's just horrible. What a horrible thing to try and create.
So your realization was about the distance between possible design goals.
Fundamentally, yes. That's what I was coming to there, is that the things that I'm reaching for and interested in my design goals are so fundamentally counter to other very good designs that people find incredibly satisfying, that I've ceased worrying about the fact that I'm sometimes just going to go, yeah, no, I'm just not going to let you do what the other guy lets you do. He's great. Go and do his thing if you want to, be able to do anything you think you should be able to do. If you want to be able to do what I think you should be able to do, and trust me, I have thought about it, then, we can be off to the races.
Yeah. It's interesting. And obviously you and I have worked together on games that are quite belligerent on that. Like A Billion Suns is the poster boy of just not being the game that you expect it to be. But even in A Billion Suns, there are all the verbs that you'd expect in terms of moving and shooting and blah, blah, blah are there. So there's a palette of expectations that is met. It's just that the way the game sets itself up introduces a bunch of other complexities where you were just like, well, can I not just push some ships together until they go boom?
Yes. Okay, I think it's probably about the right time to wrap that conversation up.
Yeah, no, very, very interesting though. I'm inspired by the simple idea of disallowing common actions. I'm going to take that one away.
Okay, yeah. I mean, I think, yeah, the root thing to say is like to remember nothing is forced to be in your game. You are
Yeah.
the overlord of it. You get to decide what goes in and what doesn't. And if something doesn't happen to work for your game, yeah, players might expect it for like 5 minutes, and then they'll get over it, and
Right.
then they'll play it and it'll be okay. Um, if you've played a game that didn't do something that it obviously should have done, or you were obviously expecting it to do, please do swing down into the comment section and let us know about it. How did it stop you from doing the thing? Did it just discourage you? Did it just go, I'm just not giving you rules for it? Let's move on. While you're doing there, hit on the like and subscribe buttons. Swing over to the Discord. Also have a conversation with us about it there. But for now, from this episode of Rule of Carnage, I think we thank you and goodbye. So thank you and goodbye. Bye bye
Bye
bye.
bye.